Hey everybody, it's Stew Smith and Jeff Nichols here with another Tactical Fitness Report, and we are going to talk about injury prevention today. And Jeff and I had a big conversation on what we should call this, and before the podcast, and the reason why is that it is very difficult to prove your programming, your workouts, or whatever you want to call it, are preventing injuries. If you are not getting injured, there's a good chance that your program is smart. There's also a good chance that you're just lucky that you didn't get injured, because injuries happen, whether it's traumatic injuries and falling and hurting yourself, or it's an actual programming injury from overuse or whatever,
Right. It's like when you get, for lack of a better phrase, we're going to call getting hurt an injury, or like whatever. Like I pulled up limp last Tuesday a little bit.
Yeah.
Doing sprints. Right. And so it happens to everyone. But it's a low hamstring pull instead of a high hamstring pull, which is incredibly, it made me happy.
Yeah. Much easier to heal. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would say I'm already at 75%, and it's been a week, which is unheard of for a hamstring pull, because typically it's 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. Especially as we age. Because I remember I had a hamstring pull in my late 20s. And that sucked. I mean, it was like 28, 29, and that took a good year.
Yep.
I mean, it was a high hamstring pull. It wasn't torn. It wasn't purple under it.
Yep.
I mean, that's when it's really bad.
That's when it's real bad, yeah.
But I could tell that. I mean, I could still run, but I couldn't sprint. And we'll get into all these different things. That's what I call know your body section, right? So let's start off with the first thing, probably the most important thing, no matter what you are training for, is the kind of gear that you are using.
Yeah.
Right. Because that can prevent injuries, right?
For sure.
A good pair of running shoes, a good pair of running shoes can prevent running injuries.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's
or at least at the very least, a pair of shoes that's not worn out.
Yep.
Like that's
new pair of shoes. Yeah.
You probably get asked pretty regularly, as I do, hey, what running shoes should I buy? And that's why I bring up the hamstring issue, is just because it's like, what we're really talking about right now is, how do you treat yourself, even before, like, how are you treating your body, as Stu is saying, pay attention to your body, to help mitigate a hamstring pull, right? Or if the hamstring pull does happen, how are you treating yourself after the fact? Like, what sort of tests, what sort of questions are you asking yourself? Stu is saying, hey, let's start from the ground up. What do you got on your feet? Do you have a pair of running shoes that's long since been overdue for replacement, right? There's a lot of slack in the ankles, and they're not tied very tight. And, they're if you look on the underside, the wear pattern is very obvious and distinct.
Yep.
You put a lot of miles on that foot or those feet. It's a good time to get a new pair of shoes. I don't know exactly, like, each running shoe or program is a little bit different, but I believe most people stick by and this is going to make people's hair stand up, somewhere between 30 miles or somewhere around 30 miles, those shoes are to be thrown away. And that's crazy, because isn't that right?
I don't know. I've gone, there are shoes that are out there. I mean, I would say 30 miles a week for a particular amount of time. Yeah, it needs to go. But I've seen most shoes can handle 300 to 500 miles. And that's on the high end, very high end.
That's extremely high,
extremely high end. Lower is smarter. Absolutely.
Yep.
There is a UK Gear makes a shoe, and they say that it is 1,000 miles before it needs to be replaced. I tested it out. I tested it out twice. I did a 1,000. I did 1,200 miles in them over a course of a year, and that was a lot of running that year, but it was they did fine. I was pretty shocked that they actually did okay. So UK Gear has a good one. I personally have preferred, for the last 20 years, being over 200 pounds.
Yeah, that's where I was going. That's a big marker.
Yes. For
the life of a shoe.
Yeah.
Someone that's 135 pounds, you may not wear that shoe out.
Yeah.
Before they just kind of like are very obvious. You're going to wear the inside out more than you probably wear the outside at times.
Absolutely.
Right? But yeah, if you're over 200 pounds,
200-pound runners put some damage on some shoes. And the ones I have found that work really well and you can push that 300, mile marker if you want, is the Brooks Beast.
Yeah.
The Brooks Beast have a really good heavy guy shoe. In fact, they even market it towards the heavy guy. If you're in the Clydesdale.
Yeah, the Clydesdale division, triathlons and such. Yeah. I that's kind of why I've always, longer distance stuff. I've kind of stuck with Solomon's, the Speed Cross. I like them.
Yeah.
I've always gotten like New Balance. When I was in the Navy, we did a good bit of work with some of the folks at New Balance and got to see some of those shoes and develop on some of them. My favorite running shoe always has been the New Balance 890. It won for 3 years in a row, won shoe of the year. Yeah. Actually, a buddy of mine received the award on behalf of New Balance at the command for that awards, which was pretty cool. But for me, I look at, like, we kind of already. This is the last piece I got to say about a shoe. Like, I don't like a Hoka. The reason why I don't like a Hoka is because it's not layered, right?
Yeah. It's like platform shoes too.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Thick. And even like the New Balance Fresh Foam, I don't like, because a heavy guy is just going to smash it. I'm saying heavy guy. Like over 170, I wouldn't use an injectable foam shoe. It's going to break down super fast. Yeah. So,
I have a different perspective in one area on that.
Yep.
Only time I wear a Hoka shoe, and I have a pair, is a hill day.
Because that would make sense. Yeah.
Downhill.
Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
I mean, I almost have to walk downhill in my Under Armour shoes because it just hurts.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's that deceleration, and that's where like the shoe I've liked going downhill on is the New Balance 1080.
Okay.
But now they use fresh foam on their insole, so I don't recommend. I recommend the 890. Like Asics, here's the thing: as I tell people, because it's competitive, every shoe makes a good. Pick the genre: running shoe, training shoe, whatever. It's just a matter of finding one, right? And so the things I've learned. Actually, let me grab a shoe. I have to do a New Balance shoe. Give me 2 seconds. This is what I was taught by podiatrists that work for New Balance of how you check a shoe. So,
that's cool. That'd be good. Hey, one thing while you're gone, I'm going to say this is that my running shoes that I have found are through trial and error. Like I've gone through Nikes and I had shin splints. I went through Asics and had plantar fasciitis.
The gift that keeps on giving.
It just depends. You just got to find a pair that works for you. And then if you find these constant injuries, you may want to, look at the style or brand of running shoe you're running in, because it might not be fitting for you. So.
Yeah, I agree. And that's so, again, I'm going to show you a spikeless track shoe. This is what I do my sprint work in. So there are 3 checks to do on a shoe specifically for training or running that I was taught. And it'll make sense. Very brief, very simple. So this is the training shoe or the sprinting shoe. It's nearly weightless.
That's awesome.
Right? It's super lightweight. And because it's for sprinting, it's even designed to not be worn with a sock, right? Because the insole. Anyway, so point is 3 things to check on a shoe: a running shoe or training shoe. You should be able to take a running and training shoe, and as you fold it, just the forefoot goes. You shouldn't get collapse of the heel, right? I can make it happen on this. This is not a good training shoe, and this is not a good long distance running shoe,
right?
Because I can collapse it, right? Also, so where the foam rubber is, and then the actual heel cup, right above it, you put your fingers on it. And if you can squeeze that very easily, almost to the point where if it didn't prohibit by the sole, you could just touch them, that's a terrible shoe to train in. There's no lateral stability, right? But running is straightforward. We shouldn't need a lot of lateral stability unless you've got really bad gait, right? And then the third piece is what I'm looking at is as I look into the shoe, right? This lip right here should be at least an inch or so forward of the heel, right? You see how this tip is forward of where the heel sits? So now I have a good heel cup. That heel will sit in there.
Yeah.
But also, you guys may or may not know, I would suggest looking at like this second hole. If you are going to do sprinting, that second hole needs to be laced, and that's what it's for. It's called a heel lock.
Yep.
That hole is a heel lock. So again, look at a shoe where, I don't that's why here's the thing. Minimus shoes were not designed for running. They honestly, the reality is Vibram came to us in 2008. They were designing a shoe for finning, right? The original Minimus 10s from New Balance was a finning shoe. And even before that, the 5-finger Vibrams, they were designed as a bootie to go over coral.
Right.
Right? That's why they were designed. It wasn't designed as a trekking shoe. It wasn't designed as, and the reason why I know it was designed that because we were designing it, right? We were part of it. So
that's awesome.
It's a really interesting thing when you look at footwear and go, oh, that's what I'm saying. Nike running shoes work fine for me. They used to not. I used to only like Adidas.
Yep.
But I just, like you've already listed, that's the thing, folks, is it's the same advice I give to people with handguns. Buy a common round. Like, is it 9mm, 45, whatever it is. This is a common shoe. It's New Balance. It's a common brand. Find a common brand that fits. Yeah. If it fits really, really good, right? Try a bunch of different ones on and just try to not like let ego get in the way and go, this one feels the best. Buy it.
Yeah.
Try them on. Okay. That's my speech.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can get them too tight. There's a whole lot of things that can cause foot pain. Yep. And then it just kind of works its way up. So I'm kind of glad we started with the feet because it really is. It starts there and it's going to work its way up. So let's do this. Let's change to boots, right? Because everybody wants to run in boots, right? So how about a recommendation for, let's say you're 6 months out from going to boot camp or, buds, type programming or Army, you're going to be rucking in boots all the time.
Yep.
How often do you think we should progress to preparing your feet for those type of, the 922 boots? Yeah.
Well, the answer, I can tell you what the answer is not, in my opinion. The answer is not put the boots on and do all your training in them right out of the gate. That's a bad idea.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a terrible idea. It intuitively, it makes sense. It's like, well, I'm going to get used to it. I'm going to throw myself into it. No. Let's say you're training 6 days a week, roughly. This is my simple advice. Let's say you're weight training 4 days a week, 4 or 5 times a week, and you're doing some running and swimming on the other side. Again, everyone's a little bit different. Just give you an idea. I would do at least maybe you're getting used to them running. Maybe put a light ruck on and go for an hour walk. That's where I would start. Now you've got an additional mass instead of velocity, right? Because most boots are really forward-leaning by design because they're designed for the person to have a backpack on, so they lean forward to manage the load that changes the ankle pitch. That's why if you take a boot and you set it down, most of those ankles are forward a little bit. Yeah. It's for that reason. So, and then, maybe weight train once a week in them. It doesn't even have to be squat day. Just get moving in them, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, it's going to keep changing. Know that. So whatever you implement into it, like I'm going to do it twice a week, and then maybe I'm going to go to 3 times a week later on. But the reality is the bulk of your running should be done in running shoes.
Yes.
The bulk of your training should be done in training shoes.
Yes.
When you do those ancillary ruck marches and stuff, because if you are rucking, that's a really good place to start with a boot. It really is.
Yeah.
Because the velocity is pretty low, but just keep the mass like nobody really should be rucking 80 pounds or more around much unless it's just kind of a bit of a test. But let's say you put 30 or 40 pounds in a rucksack or a vest and you say, hey, for 60 minutes, I'm going to walk as fast as I can and do that once a week. Those boots will be good and go, especially if you now we talk about boots. There's only 2 boots that I really can recommend that I like. The Bates Lights are okay. It's an okay boot. I like them. They're comfortable. They're way overpriced, but they're good. My favorite boot, and I hate boots. I have tried so many, is the Oakley Boot. The new Oakley Boot is extremely comfortable. So actually my third recommendation would be the Nike boots.
Okay.
Those are my 3.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah. I mean, if you're preparing for buds, you might as well get the Bates because you need them broken in before. Breaking them in can be a chore too. I mean, one of the biggest transitions from going from running shoes to boots is the blisters that boots cause. So you definitely want to break them in before you try them out, from scratch. And then like Jeff said, you need to treat boot running is the same way as you did your normal running. You progressed logically week by week by week by adding a percentage of more running and more time running every week for a significant amount of time. Do the same thing with your boot. You know, your boot may start off once a week, maybe on the weekends. You know, just do a ruck with it, try to jog with it, see how it feels. But first you got to break them in. The way I always broke in my boots is I just got them wet and walked around in them for next couple hours. Just to get a little sauce kind of breaking in for you.
Maybe you'll notice this. I've noticed this I remember this at Buds. I totally forgot about it. I got a pair of Bates. I put them on. They squeak when they're not broken in. Big time. Yeah. When they stop squeaking, they're broken in. I've noticed, mine are still not totally broken in and they squeak.
Oh, that's funny.
So, and that's just one thing I've always noticed about Buds, especially what you'll notice too, especially those Bates, that bottom insole is so nice and soft. When you're running on sand, it'll squeak real loud because it's going to slide across the sand. Very strange. And that's kind of my thought about the boots. Is you said it is my favorite boot by far is the Oakley boot. However, if you're going to be in Bates, it's not a bad idea to have an extra pair of Bates going into Buds because so for me and so many people have found this out and probably still do the same thing. I had 3 pair. Now I procured those over time, but basically I had 2 or 3 pair because I always wanted to have 1 pair dry.
Yes.
So like in the morning at 5 a.m. when I'm getting up from being wet and sandy all the next day, the previous day, I was actually starting the morning off with dry boots.
Yes.
Right. And like they didn't stay dry for very long.
Yep.
But I didn't want to put wet boots on first thing in the morning.
Yeah. And then you keep a perfect pair for inspections.
Yep.
You don't wear them running. I mean, you're probably going to get them wet and sandy anyway because that's the way inspections go.
Yep.
You're going to fail inspection and you go get wet and sandy in your perfect uniform.
Yep.
That's just part of the game.
Footwear is there's no magic to it. You know, we could talk about socks and these sort of things. And I think most of the advice is pretty similar. It's get a good cushion sock and maybe a good liner. For me, it all depends on how the shoe or boot fits. If the shoe fits well, I don't add an additional sock. I just have one pretty durable, thin nylon liner. And then I lace my boots up so they're not super tight, but they're firm.
Yep, that's a really good point. That's a great way to prevent injuries.
So let's call this the bottom of my foot. And these are my metatarsals here, my metacarpals. So when you put a foot on, so this is basically your medial malleus, no medial malleus. So this is the inside foot of your big toe, we'll call it, right?
Right.
When you put a shoe on, if that shoe is squeezing inside to out, or it's not letting range of motion, when that foot hits, the foot is supposed to hit and they'll spread out. The toes spread out. So you got to think if that boot is really, really tight or you've laced it too tight, when that foot hits, if it can't expand, the foot curls. It goes into concave. And so we get a lot of stress fractures that way. Yep. So make sure when your foot strikes in a shoe that the toes can actually spread out and then the foot comes off the ground, they come back.
That's a really good point.
Keep that in mind with your feet.
Plantar fasciitis occurs with that. And it also, you know what's annoying that occurs with that? Blisters in between your toes.
In between the toes, because they can't spread out. Yep.
That sucks.
So the other side is those ninja socks, those 5-toed socks you can get are quite nice too.
You know what? I've never tried those when I was going through. What I had was basically, you're a baseball player, so you remember sanitary socks? Yeah. That was really good. You know, underneath that wool dive sock.
Yep. Oh
and it kept sand out. You know, and you just layered your wool dive sock with a real tight, like I said, nylon. I think it was a nylon rayon blend. Had no cotton in it. Couldn't have any cotton in it. Just
there's too much friction.
Yeah. Yep. And instead of your skin rubbing against that sock, it was the sanitary inside layer sock rubbing against the wool sock, which, like I said, I never had a blister at Buds going through that.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things. If you have a really good fitting sanitary or like nylon sock, you can take your outer sock off that's full of sand. You can rinse your foot off with the sock still on, turn the sock inside out, snap it, all that sand comes off, and pull the sock right back on because you know the difficulty of putting a sock on with a wet foot. Just keep that sanitary on all the time or a dress sock, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
You can hose it off. It'll come right off the sock.
Yep.
if it's tight enough, or not, like it shouldn't be constricting. I'm talking like if it fits tight enough, fits good. Like, so if it were me, if I'm a size 12, I'd end up getting a size 10.5 or something sock.
Yeah. It should feel like, not that I know how this
skin.
feels, but it should feel like pantyhose.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask Joe Namath. Yeah.
I don't know. Should look like pantyhose, I guess. So,
did Joe Namath?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he had.
He went to Alabama. That's where he went to school.
Yeah, he went to Alabama. Yeah, I think he had a commercial or something.
Yeah, he did with geez, what were they? Silk stockings. Anyways, yeah. But so we got footwear, we got socks. I mean, then we can, we're gonna progress this thing, folks, into more difficult or more expensive or more whatever. Like, we're just going to evolve this, because we can go into compression, we can go into vibration, we can go into float tanks and acupuncture, and that's what our intent is for this. Is really work from the ground up in this case, and then talk about the nervous system in future episodes of how do we really, really stay ahead of these injuries, or at least do everything in our power to prevent what we can, minimize injury, right? Improve fatigue resistance, all those sort of things. And these are some of those steps that are worth having that conversation.
Absolutely. So our next series, this is kind of the first one that's kind of launching this series. It's going to be a combination of injury prevention techniques, but it's going to be, you're going to see it's going to be coupled with more recovery. Right. It's just going to be more in-depth recovery, because Jeff and I were going through the list of all these things that ways we can prevent injuries. And there are all the recovery techniques that we've discussed in the past, but we'll just go a little bit more in depth on why compression socks, why do those work? What is the physiology behind compression socks? Some of the other things that we discussed periodization and cross training, and, going through different cycles throughout the year. That is another way to prevent injury. I was stupid when I was first starting, and, I ran year round, I lifted year round, and I, PT'd year round. The next thing I know, multiple years later, post buds later, I was falling apart, just broke, and now cool thing about, your post buds life is that you're going to have really smart trainers at your commands that, can put programs for you together so you can have longevity and not be injured all the time, doing your job. Or if you do get injured, there's physical therapists that's going to be working hand in hand with the trainers there too, to get you, going back active again. So
since we're kind of on the topic of foot care, and that's where we're going to not evolve away from it. We're going to change it. But like for me, a couple little things that I've learned about foot care. Again, we've talked about it in previous episodes about trying to keep those feet dry when you can. Make sure you have a good set of flip-flops or Birkenstock sandals or clogs.
At the end of the day, absolutely.
Get it dry, get your feet covered even just because they're going to be cold all day. We want to keep them exposed. Well, it doesn't rain very often in Coronado or San Diego, but it's extremely humid. So at times, especially after a long day of being wet, you're just going to have a hard time drying out. And I actually do like putting on dry socks. After a while, my feet have dried. But even like go into a simple thing is the laces, when laces get wet, they tend to not want to stay tied, right? Because the fabric will expand. When they dry, they contract. So that's why wet laces are even worse, like future life for some of you, frozen laces. If you're in a really cold environment, man, we've got to make sure those laces are tied, especially if you're in a mountain type or on night vision, you start tripping. So what I always did on my shoes and buds, I just took a rubber band, just a regular rubber band, or just a little piece of tape that's 1 inch. And when I got done tying my boots, I just kind of gathered all at top and I just put a rubber band around it real quick. So now they may flop a little bit, but they won't come untied, even if they're super wet with that rubber band. Rubber band breaks, oh well, right? You can use tape and dog ear and then just pull the tape off. That's another thing for me, just little stuff that made a big difference for me was just not having to stop to tie my damn shoes.
Yeah.
Because you'll see it. Like, we just watch, like guys and buds, the first couple runs, everyone's stopping to tie their shoes, right? And then everyone comes up to their own ideas of how to secure their laces. But that's kind of all these sort of things it's worth having a conversation or talk about, because What you don't want, I guess what Stu and I are really trying to prevent is that you show up with these little things that really, they add up to value. Each one of these by themselves may not provide a ton of value. But if you add them all up, you know, we're going to go over 5, 6, 8, 10 different modalities or techniques. If you add those techniques up, you're going to have a real menu, if you will, of recovering and mitigating injury at the end of each day at Buds.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, another thing too is, you know, something you mentioned earlier, you kind of pulled up a little bit on a hamstring pull earlier last week.
Yep.
That's another thing too. Know your body, right? I guarantee you Jeff's training right now probably doesn't have him doing sprints right now.
No.
You know, not a week after that type of injury. So, you know, even though it's written in your program, doesn't mean you have to do it. You know, if you pulled a hamstring last week, you know, you need to pull back on some of those fast speed runs, maybe start working on some goal pace work, even longer, slower distance, maybe even take a few days off of running altogether if you need to, and do some non-impact activity. So knowing your body and being smart is the way to prevent injuries. That number one, especially if you have previous injuries from the past that, you know, if you do X, you're going to feel it again.
Yeah.
Right? You want to try to avoid feeling it again.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, folks, is we really, in our interest or our desires to work harder than the next person, never quit, all these sort of things. When you get hurt and injured, that is a clear indicator of, like, for me, it just, I pulled up on one of the sprints and it was like, whoo, okay. And as I reflect on my training, it's like, okay, I jumped a lot into sprinting and all these sort of things and teaching, and fortunately, it wasn't a severe pull, and it's not going to be. It'll be healed. I actually jogged a little bit on Friday. Today, I was going to do a run. It's a little bit stiff, so I'm not going to run today. My next running plan is going to be Friday, but it's going to be a moderate pace, right? Like moderate intervals, maybe run 100s and 200s at a 60% pace. That's what I'm going to do. Right?
That's really smart. You know, another thing too, like I said, use your head, because, you know, he's pulling back, taking a day off. Something to consider too, anytime you're doing sprints, warm up really, really well. No need to go from 0 to 60, you know, in their first 2 sets, right? Build up to that. You know, that should take some time to build up to. And even if you do it perfectly, there's a chance you're gonna pull a hamstring. I mean, it just, sometimes it happens.
That's exactly what happened. It was a beautiful day. And typically my warm up, I give myself 400 meters to warm up. And you're like, that's not very far. No, I'm going to break up each 100 in thirds. So I might lunge for a third of 30 meters. And I might do hops and skips and karaoke. I do that all the way around the track. I do 12 different movements around the track until I get back and go, how do I feel? And then I do my 60 to 70% effort hundreds, walk 100 until I'm ready. And I don't know how long it's going to take, right? I may, because we end up running about the other day, on Friday even, we ran almost 2 miles of sprints. Almost 2 miles, but it was smart.
That's a lot.
Smart 2 miles in total distance covered.
Yeah.
So it can be done. We just got to be smart about it.
Yeah. Another thing too is, you know, listen to your body from the day before. You might have had a really good workout the day before. It might have had nothing to do with sprinting, but you sweat your butt off and you didn't hydrate enough the next day. You didn't get your electrolytes up, you know, and that's a really easy way to go into the next day with really tight, you know, bilateral muscles, you know, in your legs. You know, it's some reason it goes there. You know, the big muscle groups are hard to rehydrate sometimes. Something I use is a magnesium rub. You know, on that, it works really well. It's called Sore and Tired too.
Yeah, I've got some of that stuff, not that exact stuff, but I've got some similar.
Yeah, and that helps. Like today, we ran the hill today, which is, you know, it's probably about a 5.5 mile run with some hills, and, you know, it takes a couple miles just to get there. And then we ran a bunch of hills, but it was so humid and it was almost 80 degrees, you know, so it was hot. And, you know, it was this first thing in the morning. I came back drenched. In fact, I'm still wearing flip-flops today because when I finished the run, my feet were pruned like I'd been swimming for the last 45 minutes.
Yep.
Right. And so it's, just soft feet, that's another way to get blisters.
Oh yeah.
And I knew I was sweating so much that I immediately been rehydrating, getting my electrolytes in, using this rub, so tomorrow's workout, when we do add some fast runs in there, or, high rep calisthenics or whatever we're going to do, I'm prepared for it too. So once again, that's another way in your programming that you can prevent injuries. But if you really kind of re-examine what we're talking about, it's really all recovery. So we are recovering today so we won't get an injury tomorrow.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that's where we can best address injury prevention, by creating a series, which is what Jeff and I are going to do, create a series and discuss all of these different techniques to help you prevent injuries, using gear, using products, using programming, and just, some creative ideas to help you prevent those injuries in your training. So
you kind of see today we talked about the feet and footwear, and then we'll just start working our way around. Like, well, to be honest, I'm not sure. Next one might be compression gear, right? Which would be, right, like the defend compression gear, or we go in that same genre, we got Normatec, pneumatic compression, right? So those are, again, but we can cover the topic of the value of compression. That's really what we're doing, right? Yeah. And now we just have all these examples of shoes and like that we can show you. But really, it's like, okay, footwear, the importance of footwear. Got it. Check. Covered that topic. The importance of using compression gear. Got it. Check. The importance of, right, using float tanks, acupuncture, whatever it is. We're just going to keep picking these pieces and talk about them specifically, rather than just saying, like we've done in previous, go, oh, yeah, you guys should do float tanks and acupuncture massage. But we're going to explain the physiological and even like the emotional value of it.
Yeah,
so,
I love it. Yeah, everything: stretch, flexibility, mobility, massage.
Yep.
The type of tools. Like Jeff's car buffer, I will tell you, Jeff's car buffer thing has just revitalized me.
It's a good one.
I
really can't take credit for it, but yeah.
I know, but I heard it from you, so therefore you educated me on the car buffer. So anyway, all right. So yeah, I think that'll be a fun next series to do over the next week or so, and we'll hash these things out. So folks, come on back. You got anything else, Jeff?
No, we're good. I just think that if you guys have any real requests, because again, we are going to cover your typical, right? We're going to talk about compression, float tanks, acupuncture, massage. These things are really
ice baths,
right? Ice baths, absolutely. Saunas, right? We could get into restricted blood flow. It just kind of depends on where we're going to go. But right now, we're going to cover the topics that most people are aware of, or in many cases, probably you guys have tried many of these. Maybe it's like the float tank is the next one where a lot of people have tried, but there's a real, the approach and how to use them and how to use the float tanks. Because even if you don't know what you're doing, you get in a float tank and you can calm down, is a big benefit. Sure. If you really have your system and your process down and figuring that float tank piece out, it's valuable. Same thing with because a lot of people don't know how to put on a compression stocking. People are like, what do you mean you just put it on? No, you don't. There's a way to put on a compression sock specifically to improve the value of that sock tremendously and make it far more comfortable. And I've never seen anyone really show it or talk about it.
That's a good point. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
But women know it because that's how they put stockings on, so they don't tear them. And that's a big problem with men. Like, 'cause a lot of us, like, you put a recovery sock on after a training event, or maybe you went for a long run. A lot of people can run from their house and go for a run, but a lot of people have to drive or commute, or they train, or they fly to an event, and then they get done with an event and they got to go get back on the car or plane. Well, they're sedentary and they're sweaty. And the last thing they want to do is put on a compression sock, right? Or compression legging. Well, there's a way to do it so you're not like, we all get done running or training and it's like, man, I got to take my shoes off. You're like trying to kick them off because your back is tight and you don't want to bend over. Well, there's a way to do it. So that's kind of, we really want to teach you guys some of the stuff that we've learned that's helped us out.
All right. I love it. All right. So that'll be our next several series there, shows in the series. So we'll focus on recovery and injury prevention.
Thanks, Stu. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll see you.